So very good to see all of you. As a historian of religions, I often deal with texts and older texts sometimes. But today, and as part of this conference, talking about ghosts and other things, I wanted to try to change it up a little bit. So I'm going to talk about something called the Moog, which is a technology. It's a musical technology. Some of you might know it, some of you might not know it, but this guy knows it, and he likes it. And the picture very well demonstrates what I want to talk about, that actually this technology became, right from the start, very associated with the occult. It became almost like an occult musical instrument. And why was that, and how did that develop? So the question, a ghost in the Moog, we don't necessarily have to talk about ghosts. It could be consciousness, spirit, any other thing, but this just aligns with the conference. So in terms of like initial theorization of what I'm talking about, many of you, I suspect, know about Christopher Partridge's take on occulture. It has been a very common theory. But basically, he argues that from the 1960s and 70s, occult goes and changes from being an underground, almost elite movement type to a much broader landscape that connects with music, cinema, literature, and so many other pop cultural phenomena. And that basically it's a broad field of shared values, shared attitudes, and shared practices. But what I find interesting is that he doesn't talk about technology really at all. And I think all of us know that technology has been a kind of a central force in also cultural change and cultural development. Just think about the printing press, the telegraph, television, and so forth. All these technologies throughout history, they have changed the cultural landscape, and they have also changed religions and spirituality. So I think we need to look into these more kind of physical objects and also how they become part of the spiritual landscape or cultural landscape. So the argument here is that technological innovation has equally been central for the contemporary emergence of occulture and should be factored in the whole discussion, basically. It's going to be a little bit more tricky because, of course, there are technologies that are physical machines, but there are also other types of technologies, as you all know. Michel Foucault, for example, talked about the technologies of the self. This idea that we as individuals, we are not completely determined by larger systems, social systems, power systems. We actually have the ability to push back and manifest our own selves in the world as well. And we can use tools to do that. It could be instruments, it could be the Moog. The Moog could be a tool people could use to manifest themselves in the world in a spiritual way. So that's where the argument is going, based on Foucault here as well. So just an overview as a start. This is actually what I hope to demonstrate or prove to you. You can bring up the discussion afterwards if you don't feel that I proved this in some way. But so the invention of these new musical technologies, such as the Moog, had a direct impact on the development of contemporary occultism, occulture. Modern occultism had a direct impact on the understanding of the Moog and early synthesizer music technology. So it's also the other way around. Occultism had an influence on the technology itself. Moog as a machine technology also became a technology of the self in contemporary esotericism. So quite a lot of arguments, but they are all connected, as we will see, I hope. So first off, we have here Robert Moog, or Bob Moog. Many people pronounce it Moog, but he insisted that this should be called Moog. I found out later on as well. But I mean, considering music in totality, ever since ancient times, music has been a constituting part of religious practice. Ancient Egypt, ancient India, ancient China, all the way up through the ages, there have been music, and music has been regarded as holy, as being able to do something to the individual or to the collective practice, to the ritual practice, So music has always been integrated. So why not in our time in other ways than the established religious traditions? So this is, of course, this is the Moog. It comes in various forms and shapes. You know the synthesizer, but often it's also like a modular thing where you have all these small boxes that can do different things, and you can connect them, and it becomes even grander. So it's a kind of a complex musical instrument, but it was a breakthrough. He found out the technology called voltage-controlled oscillation, where you can actually, for the first time, 1964, you can begin to really control electronic signals. So you can compose music that is right to the point. You can control the pitch. You can control all these things. You couldn't really do that before, so it was really innovative and groundbreaking that suddenly electronic music could be something you could really make compositions out of. And of course, we'll come back to this, but is that really music, this kind of electronic music? Many skeptics argued this is not music at all, these strange sounds. So you can see the scope of it. It's really complex, big machines, very expensive machines as well. But they are still being used today, and there is a great passion for these machines around the world. And a lot of music being produced is still being produced through Moog modulators and synthesizers. But in terms of my proof, my demonstration, the sources, not necessarily textual sources, I will take this around here. So I will, go into a little bit Kenneth Anger. Some of you know him. Krautrock, phenomena, industrial music, psychedelic, new age culture, and techno. And I think if we look at all these phenomena, which we could argue are part of occulture, we will see that the Moog and electronic music is fundamental to these traditions. First off, Kenneth Anger, the filmmaker, the avant-garde filmmaker, very well known to people who are interested in occultism, occulture. He was also influenced in his own background, studied these things extensively. But he made these avant-garde movies and short films. For example, The Invocation of My Demon Brother in 1969. It is very much a part of the counterculture at the time. But it embraces occultism, and you can see a definite link with Crowley and the Golden Dawn in the ritual dress and everything. But what most people don't know is that Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones, he is the one playing the Moog in the whole introduction to the film. And he plays this, and it creates some really eerie sounds. I don't know if I can get it through the microphone. I'll just try for the fun of it so you can get an impression. But if not, it's also okay. Can you hear it? Yeah? That's what I thought it would come through my mouth. So I think today we are so used to electronic music, but in the 60s this was completely new for most people. This was, what is this? Completely strange, spacey, eerie sounds. And they played the background to this very interesting occult film, occulture film, so to speak. And you can see a little image from the film here. So you see it's also very psychedelic, and it has elements of the Vietnam War. It has magicians dressing up. It has all these things that go together. But some theorizing has been done on the Moog, the social construction of the Moog, but not so much on the occult aspects of it. But Elizabeth Weiss writes, the soundtrack of this film is aggressively loud, repetitious music performed by Mick Jagger on a Moog synthesizer, a soundtrack that by virtue of its rhythmic repetitiveness and loudness seems to leap off the screen and invade the viewer's body and nervous system. Or as another writer writes at the bottom here, the Invocation soundtrack signifies and enacts the faltering of an inchoate youth culture on the brink of implosion. So a lot is going on, but there's also this idea that this music, it goes into your nervous system. It creates an altered state of consciousness. It's not supposed just to be background music, to be entertaining. It's supposed to somehow infect the listener and the viewer. So also crowd rock, some of you might be familiar with psychedelic rock, which makes use of guitars and drums and all these things. But in the late 60s, early 70s, this also developed in Germany especially, and there they would full on take on this new musical technology, especially the Moog and other elements like this. And they were also influenced by Timothy Leary, who is called the LSD guru sometimes. And this whole youth culture, counterculture, experimented quite a lot with changing people's consciousness. They saw that as the key to finding the true self, but also to changing society in general. And based on that note, these German musicians, they began to make music that was psychedelic, meaning that it was supposed to be able to change people's consciousness. But it was completely, or not completely at the start, but it became more and more electronic based. And you can see Tangerine Dream's album cover here, with like this baby all wired up. It's called Electronic Meditation. And you have this by the Ashra Temple, and together with Timothy Leary, actually, 7 Up, which also was constructed to change people's consciousness. So there is a definite spiritual, esoteric flavor to these albums and to their covers, and they were made with electronic musical technology. But they were not supposed to be music that you just put on and then have a nice background lounge music. No, it's supposed to be a trip, to emulate a trip in some way. Here you have Klaus Schulze, one of the pioneers of the Berlin School, coming out of krautrock, being a part of the Tangerine Dreams, and you can see he's completely surrounded by his gear, and he even has a mask on. He's almost going into space here with the computers and all these things. So already here you see this connection that these consciousness-altering, transcending sounds are connected with this type of musical technology. And that's also because all the classical musicians, more or less, at least many of them, and the established academies said, no, this electronic music is not music. It has nothing to do with music, it's just strange sounds, basically. But these guys, they took it on, and soon there would be this notion common that, no, this is kind of occult music. And so it was rejected music, because it was strange and weird. So it was occult, and that's quite similar to the whole category of occultism. It has often been rejected by a lot of people, so we have this whole category, rejected knowledge. This was rejected music in some sense, even though it became very popular, as I also will talk about. A little bit later, the whole industrial movement, the whole musical movement that started in the 70s became also strong in the 80s, and Throbbing Gristle, Psychic TV, also Coil, and many others came out of this movement. You see them here. And of course, they use a lot of occult imagery in their aesthetic. They also made their music into rituals that were supposed to channel spirits and then work through them. A lot of ritual components. And they also took on the Moog as being basic to many of their albums in their works. And so you could argue that this is an occult musical movement. And the question is, of course, is it just music? Is it just a musical movement? No, my argument would be that this is also occultism in contemporary times. Occultism is not just texts or the usual ritual practice. Occultism extends into this occultural landscape in a very extensive way. If we look at the psychedelic rock movement in the 60s, which had the same aim to transcend and to expand consciousness, one of the first Moog albums made with the Moog, because no ordinary musician would touch it and could understand it. It was very complex. But this one of the first one from '67, is called Cosmic Sounds, the Zodiac. And basically, it's the 12 signs of the Zodiac, different sounds encapsulating the astrology and the zodiacal signs. Furthermore, if we look into the whole electronic music movement, which has really cultivated this idea that when you go into a rave, into an old warehouse where there's no light or anything, there's only the strobe light, smoke, you would change your consciousness, your societal personality would be stripped away. It would be a cult of ecstasy, as some have argued. This was based on electronic music. Sometimes it would be outside, like almost a druidic ritual. Huge movement, the second Summer of Love in the UK in the late 80s, building on the same phenomena. But all this would not have happened without this kind of electronic technology. So this innovation promoted a kind of new occultural practice centered on music. And these are some of the first albums that took form based on the Moog, Mort Garson, for example. And as you can see from the covers, the Black Mass, Lucifer, with occult symbols, this patchwork with the inverted pentagram and the grass and roots coming up. It's all about occult themes, also the tracks and so forth. All occult themes. And Moog himself says, I knew it was applicable to pop music, but our first market was the experimental composers, and that's not what you would call the basic for a big music business. Nobody believed there was any future in that sort of thing, but definitely it took off. But it's also interesting that Moog himself, he basically argued that these types of technologies, they are also haunted. There is a ghost in the machine, so to speak. He actually saw the Moog synthesizer as having some kind of consciousness. There is a connection. I hesitate to use the word spiritual, but it has to do with the forces that we know reliving things can exert and can respond to. I'm 100% sure that things like this synthesizer, even though they are not living in biological sense, there is some sort of consciousness that we can connect with. So it becomes an extension of the musician, this kind of technology. So similar to the guitar being a symbol of counterculture and rebellion, the Moog also became an instrument for a musical rebellion that took on positively the occult and facilitated it through the decades in many ways. So this leads me to the conclusion from this overview of different facets of the embrace of this technology, that the connection between technological innovation and occulture is still vastly unexplored. Yet, as here demonstrated, there is strong evidence for the connection, I think. This paper further demonstrates the dialectical relationship between innovation in religion, esotericism, and technology. Many new musical expressions emerged that were connected with occult practice, and the initial understanding of electronic music, the Moog, was extensively connected with esotericism. Moog synthesizers became extended technology of the self. They became a part of the countercultural milieu way into the 80s and forward. So thank you very much for your attention.
can't see it, then you just never know it.